If you have a meniscus tear and you still want to work out without constantly worrying about making your knees worse, this is exactly what I would do. My name is Kiani. I'm a physical therapist and fitness coach, and these are the 5 things that I would do if I had a meniscus tear and I did not want to make it worse by working out. So, first thing is you want to keep training your entire lower body. So many people get diagnosed with meniscus tears and they're told to stop lifting or only do low impact exercises, which that drives me crazy because lifting, strength training is literally no impact. Impact is when you have some type of absorbing force when you land the floor. So like when you jump or when you run or when you do a plyometric push up, right? Those types of things are impact. But strength training is little to no impact. So when people are told that they have to avoid high impact things and then they completely write off strength training, it just doesn't make sense because strength training is really low impact. You're not jumping, you're not running, you're not really absorbing forces at a high level like that. Not saying that strength training isn't hard because it is hard, but it's just not high impact. So I share that to say if you do have a meniscus tear and you've been told to avoid impact activities, that does not mean you can't strength train. It actually means that you can strength train, and it's more of a reason to be strength training. So the reason I'm telling you to continue training your lower body is because if you stop training your legs, the muscles around your knee are going to get weaker. And whenever you have a meniscus tear, those muscles that support your knee joint become even more important because you lose the inherent stability that your knee has when you have a healthy meniscus. Because the meniscus is a shock absorber and it plays a role in your knee feeling stable. So if you have a tear in your meniscus, you no longer have that stability. But it's not the end of the world because your muscles can also act as a absorber and also protect your knee joint, even in the case of having a meniscus tear. So you need to get your quads, your hamstrings, your glutes, your calves, all of your muscles strong in order to take pressure off your knee joint and have that stability coming from somewhere else. So the stronger and more coordinated those muscles are, the more that they can compensate for the changes that are happening in your knee because of the meniscus tear. So I know you guys have heard the cliche of if you don't use it, you lose it. That is true when it comes to knee pain as well. So if you're never using your knee because you're avoiding it because you were told to just rest or do only low impact exercises and you think strength training is too much, you're never preparing your knee to tolerate harder things. So when you do try to squat or when you do try to lunge or do any activity that requires you to use your knee, it's likely going to hurt. And it's not always because you just have a meniscus tear. The meniscus tear, yes, it can contribute to your symptoms, but avoiding the movements of the knee and getting the knee stronger is a bigger contributor. So let's avoid all of that and get your leg strong as fuck and continue to do what you can because the meniscus tear is literally just something that pops up on an image and it doesn't have to dictate what your knee is physically capable of. Second thing, you want to use hinge movements, but you don't want to stop there. So think your RDLs, your deadlifts, hip thrusts, good mornings, variations of those exercises. Those are all great exercises to do. They target your hamstrings, your glutes, your back, the entire backside of your body. Those exercises are going to get stronger. But here's the thing, a lot of times when people have meniscus tears or really any knee injury, they tend to gravitate towards those exercises because they usually bother the knee less. The things that bother the knee are typically squats, lunges, step ups, step downs, things that are more knee dominant. So, whatever hinge work you can do, it's likely not going to be a provocative or provoking exercise. Your knee is typically going to do fine with those because your glutes are doing most of the work, your hamstrings are doing most of the work. They're more hip dominant. But if your goal is to have healthy knees, you need to be working your quads in some way, shape, or form. So you need to be doing squats, variations of lunges, step ups, And if you want to get back to sports, specifically sports that require you to pivot and run, you need those exercises as well because your knee is always traveling over your toe during those activities. So we need to get your knees stronger in those exercises. And the exercises that do that are squat variations, step ups, split squats, those types of things. So we can't just avoid them forever. Yes, you can start with hinge work early on when your knee is very flared up, but at some point you have to start reintroducing these other exercises. Kind of think of it like when you were learning to ride a bike, you had to use the training wheels, right? But the goal was never for you to use the training wheels forever. You didn't want to be 15 riding a bike with training wheels, right? The goal was for you to wean off of it eventually. Same thing with the knee. Same thing when you have a meniscus tear. You want to use whatever support you may need or whatever modifications you may need and eventually wean off of it as much as you can. The third thing, you want to find variations of every knee dominant movement that you can do with little to no pain. So, knee dominant movements are anything that's not really a hinge pattern. So, squats, step ups, split squats, lunges, things that start to work towards getting your knee over your toe. Your knee may not be directly over your toe, but anything that's working in that direction is a knee dominant movement. So you want to find variations of all of those that you can do with little to no pain. So let's start with squats. Maybe you're not ready to put a bar on your back and do squats. That's fine. You may never have to do that again, depending on your goal. But there is other squat variations that you can do. And I always say if you have a heartbeat and if you got out of bed and if you got off the toilet, there is a squat variation that you can do. So you may not be ready for barbell back squats. That's fine, but you can always modify it or even find a different type of squat to do. So maybe you squat to a box or a bench. Maybe you can do a back squat, but it hurts when you get to a certain depth. So you can do a partial range back squat or a box squat that takes away the painful range. So, or the painful point. So, say if you're squatting to here, you start to have pain here, you can put a box or a pin here so that it tells you where your pain free range is. So instead of squatting to the painful part, you squat just above it, and boom, you're squatting without pain, and eventually you can kind of lower the depth. Another good variation or modification to make is using some type of support. TRX support is good. You can even change the entire variation. If you're not doing a back squat or a front squat, you can do a goblet squat. Or you can even do the leg press. People don't realize that the leg press is a squat movement because they are using some sort of machine. But leg press is still a squat. Your body doesn't know that you're not standing up and going directly against gravity. So you can still use the leg press in order to train the same muscles and build back up to standing squats. Leg press is a great option. And honestly, you don't ever really have to fully squat and standing in terms of like doing a barbell back squat or a front squat, those types of squats. You can use the leg press and do a ton of different variations on the leg press and get your legs really strong because at the end of the day in your program, you are going to have different variations of squat and split stance patterns. So if you do leg press one day and then you're doing split squats, lunges, reverse lunges, those types of things, you're still getting your muscles stronger. This is why one exercise doesn't make up an entire program. So leg press is a great option. I don't want you guys to sleep on it. Now, let's talk about split squats and lunges. Maybe Bulgarian split squats are too much for you right now since you hurt your knee. Then, if that's the case, you can either do a different type of lunge. You can even modify the split squat. Instead of doing a Bulgarian split squat where your back leg is on the bench, you can do a regular split squat where your back leg is on the floor. That takes a lot of pressure off the knee. Then you can build back up to Bulgarians. If Bulgarians or the regular split squat, when your back leg is on the floor, if that only hurts during a certain part, like say it only hurts when you get really, really low, you can modify the depth. Same thing we talked about with the squat. You can use support. You can hold on to something. If that doesn't work, then you start to try out different modifications or different variations of single leg movements or one sided movements. Maybe walking lunges hurt. You can try a reverse lunge. Every exercise has a progression and a regression. You just have to work through them and know what exercises are harder than another and what exercises are easier, so you don't end up putting yourself into a position or exercise that your body is not ready for, or your knee is not ready for. So the goal isn't to force one specific exercise because you heard it was good for your knee. The goal is to find a version of each movement pattern that lets you go hard with it and get strong without irritating your knee, without flaring it up, without causing significant increases in swelling. And you repeat this process for every single movement pattern. So you don't ever have to avoid a specific movement. You just have to know how to modify it. And that's exactly what I show you inside my programs. If you are curious as to how you can make these modifications, just check the link in the description and it'll have it, or just comment me and I'll send it to you, and you can modify these things on your own. Fourth thing, once you find the movements that you can do without irritating your knee and causing a flare up, you're going to stick to them for 4 to 6 weeks. And this is a big mistake I see people make all the time when it comes to knee pain. They change exercises every single workout. And when it comes to any injury, or really when you want to make progress on anything, even outside of an injury, you want to treat things like a science experiment. In a science experiment, you have variables that stay the same, you have variables that change. And the reason for this is because you have to keep some things the same and you have to change one thing at a time so that you know what's working and what's not. If you're changing everything all the time, you're not going to know what's causing what. You're not going to know why you have pain this day because you're just doing anything. So you want to have some type of structure. So once you find the movements that work well for you, stick to them for 4 to 6 weeks. I literally had somebody ask me if they should rotate different squat and lunges every session, like if they should try new ones every time they work out. And my answer was absolutely not, because you need time to rebuild the strength, you need time to rebuild coordination, and you need time to progress to the next one. So a split squat works well today, a regular split squat works well today. You're not just going to go to Bulgarians the next day, because you're literally taking your knee from 0 to 100 in just a day or two span, and that's a recipe for a flare up. So you want to give yourself time to get used to the movements, give yourself time to get stronger, and then progress to the harder variation. So if you switch from, let's say, reverse lunges to walking lunges or forward lunges just because it felt fine one day, then you're literally just asking your knee to handle a lot more stress than it's ready for. And that is literally going to cause your knee to hurt all over again. And it may not be because of your meniscus tear, it's literally just because you're doing something your body is not ready for. So instead, find the movements that your knee likes, that your knee tolerates well. You want to keep doing them for at least 4 to 6 weeks. And within those 4 to 6 weeks, keep progressing them by adding reps, adding weight, maybe adding more sets, improving your technique, decreasing the support. So if you're doing a Bulgarian split squat, holding on to something, remove that form of stability and do it without holding on. These are all progressions that you can make within that 4 to 6 week period before you go trying something that's even harder. And lastly, the fifth thing is gradually build your knees tolerance back up, which goes along with what we just talked about. So over time, you want to go through progressions, like all of your squat progressions. If you're starting with a goblet squat, you're going to stick with that for like 4 to 6 weeks and then progress to a harder form of squat. So maybe a back squat, a front squat. You're going to do the same thing with step ups. A lot of times with step ups, people have pain, especially when it comes to the knee, is they have pain when they're doing a step up that is more like glute dominant, so like a high box step up. So an easy way to progress step ups is to simply start with the low step and then progress the height. As you progress the height and you get to a normal size step, then you can start to add weight. These are all things you can do within that one exercise variation. Same thing with split squats and lunges. A split squat is going to be easier than a reverse lunge from a dynamic standpoint. And then a reverse lunge is going to be a little bit easier than a walking lunge, and a forward lunge is going to be the hardest form of a lunge. And then you also have to consider what leg is in the front versus the back, because there's different levels of stress that are placed on the trail knee. So the knee in the back versus the knee in the front. All of that is inside my knee pain program. But this just goes to show you that there's so many different variations and progressions and regressions that you can make. And you always want to start with the least demanding variation and then gradually work towards the most demanding variation. You're going to do that for every single movement pattern. You're going to do it for squats, you're going to do it for step ups, you're going to do it for lunges, split squats, step downs, all of those things. So the goal is never to avoid all these movements forever. The goal is to prepare your body to handle them again. And the way you do that is by going through progressions. So if your meniscus tear is keeping you from working out the way you want, it's keeping you from running, it's keeping you from hitting your fitness goals, I break down all of this: how to modify your workouts, how to progress your exercises, how to regress them, how to build your entire knee back up, entire leg back up, actually, because there's a ton of stuff in that program that addresses even like your hip, your calf, gives you prerequisites to running. So if your knee is keeping you from doing any of those things, then be sure to get inside. The link is in the description if you're watching on YouTube, and the link is also going to be placed in the comments if you're watching this elsewhere. And if you don't see that, just comment knee and I'll send it directly to you. If you want one-on-one coaching where we work together on not just your knee, but all of your fitness goals, whether it's body recomp, fat loss, muscle building, training for a high rocks, training for any specific performance activity, comment coaching, and I'll send you the details of how it works, and I'll send you the link to sign up. Peace.